гости. Добар ден, добро дојдовте на денешната.
Good day and welcome to the second press conference today of the government of the Republic of North Macedonia. We have Mr. Basimi and the chief of the IMF, Mr. Jacques Mignan. Mignan, please. Mr. Mignan, please take the floor.
It's good to see a lot of colleagues and friends here. My name is Jacques Mignan. I'm the head of the IMF mission. Not for long, because in January, Annette Kyobe, my colleague, is going to take over. But I wanted to leave you with a few really, I think, important messages. But the first one is to thank the authorities, our colleagues at the ministry, in government, at the central bank, for their incredible candor in the discussions and for their incredible hospitality. So the first really important message that I want to pass on is that we have reached an agreement between the staff of the IMF and the authorities to complete the review of the IMF program. Now, this is conditional on the executive board of the IMF approving. The meeting is planned for December 21, but IMF staff will recommend to the board that they approve the review. And if they approve, that will make 200 million euros approximately available to the authorities of North Macedonia. I understand that the authorities plan to draw approximately 150 million euros and treat the rest as precautionary. So the fact that we reach agreement is really very positive news, and I'm going to be specific about the policies underpinning that. The second message that I wanted to pass on is that we expect economic activity to accelerate as we enter 2024. We project construction of the Corridor 8/10D project to accelerate. Right now, they're doing a lot of geotechnical studies, but as construction picks up, this is going to stimulate economic activity. At this stage, we project approximately 2.3% growth for this year and 3% growth for next year. The third message that I want to leave you with is that fiscal policy, so budget policies and the budget numbers are going well and are going in the right direction. We are confident that the authorities are going to meet the budget deficit target of approximately 42.8 billion dinars for this year. In fact, there's a possibility that they may do better, so a lower deficit, which is good news. And going forward into 2024, we fully support the government's intention to approve a 2024 budget consistent with a deficit target of approximately 34 billion dinars. Now, why is it important to continue reducing the deficit? There's three reasons. The first one, I think is very important, is because the organic budget law, which is a national law, mandates a deficit limit of 3%. So we need to gradually converge towards that. The second reason is because we live in a very uncertain world, and it's important for the economy to continue rebuilding buffers, rebuilding savings in case there's a crisis, a global crisis, or any reason. And the final reason is that inflation is coming down, but we want inflation to continue coming down. And it's important that fiscal policy work with monetary policy helping this. Let me say, very important, we are going into an election period, and it's important that this election period that all sectors of society, government, political parties, unions, everyone, avoid big promises for which are currently unfunded. Right now, the General Collective Agreement, we fully understand why it was approved. It was important to raise wages for wages to catch up with inflation, and the 2024 budget has sufficient funds to cover the General Collective Agreement. But we should not come up with new promises, new increases. That would be bad for the budget, and it would be bad for inflation as well. The fourth important message that I want to leave you with is that inflation is coming down, and that's very important. It's important that inflation return to the central bank target. Now, why is inflation coming down? It's coming down because of global factors. global energy prices, global food prices are coming down. But more importantly, there's been significant policy tightening, which we welcome. The fact that inflation is coming down, the fact that inflation expectations are anchored, the fact that the FX market is stable shows that the framework of the central bank is robust and the central bank has the instruments to deliver it. Now, we should not be complacent because wages are growing at 15% right now, and we want to avoid a situation where this fast wage growth spills over to inflation, and inflation, which is coming down, starts going back up again. So we have talked to the central bank, and the central bank has reassured us that if this risk to inflation materialize, they are ready to act if and when needed. The fifth message that I want to leave you with, and this is, I think, important, the banks in Macedonia are in pretty good health. This is very important for us, but we have looked, we pay a lot of attention, the banks are liquid, they're well capitalized, they're profitable, so we do not have major financial stability concerns. And we fully agree with the central bank that now that the banks are profitable, this is the time to continue tightening capital requirement and building buffers in the banks. Finally, I want to talk about growth. It's really important to reaccelerate growth in North Macedonia because it's key to continue seeing incomes in North Macedonia converging towards those of Western Europe. And that process was going very, very well between 2000 and 2010. It's worked less well since then. So we need to put in place policies to accelerate productivity growth. We need to put in place policies to increase investment. And that's why it's so important to preserve the space in the budget for capital spending. If you look at capital spending last year, this year, and the next year, it's going to be at historically high levels. That's really good news. Infrastructure is important. We need to continue building on this, and so we need to preserve that space. More generally, we have been flagging for a long time that there's still room to improve the business environment further, to improve the rule of law further, and continue increasing education and general skills in the population. So let me stop there. Let me say that I have loved the time that I have spent working on North Macedonia. I have always felt the warmth and hospitality of its people, and I'm very, very grateful for it. Thank you.
Dear, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Besimi, will address you. Mr. Besimi, please take the floor. First of all, I would like to thank the IMF mission team. I would like to thank them for their 2-week visit headed by Jacques. This followed by Annette. She'll be the head of the mission. But I would like to express my gratitude for your support to our economic policies and our government and our country to face when we're facing all the challenges. Dear citizens, as an independent country, we have the right to choose, to select as a country what are we going to do with our future. While we were handling the COVID crisis, the energy crisis, the inflation crisis, the geostrategic wars in Ukraine and in Asia, and a lot of many other challenges, there were options before us. How are we going to finance growth? How are we going to finance anti-crisis measure and mitigate the shocks we were experiencing? We had a choice. Should we go to the open international market? That would have been expensive to us and to our future generations because of high interest rates. So it's not going to pay, but this generation, these high interest rates would have had to be paid by future generations. That is why we approached IMF to review our credit rating and to create more favorable conditions for what we wanted to achieve, which is to have sustainable public finances, a robust macroeconomic basis and to create sound growth foundations. Our natural partner was the International Monetary Fund under those conditions, so we proceeded with discussions and negotiations about such program. It was extremely difficult, but we managed to conclude a contract last year. This is not only applied to the funding from IMF, only from IMF, but it was the foundation that opened a lot of other opportunities. The previous press conference with the Prime Minister, these actions generated 500 million of euros for financing the budget under favorable conditions, 10 and more years of repayment period, 4 or 5 years of grace periods, interest rates that are half of what would have been paid on the international market. So annually, this is around 30 million euros of savings or for the period of maturity of these loans for 10 years on average. So that is about 300 million euros that we can use to build schools, hospitals, highways, and many other projects. As long as the public finances are well managed and we have support from the international financial institutions. But in order to achieve this, we needed consistent policies, and we have to survive in times of crisis where we have to continue with the fiscal consolidation to reduce the budget deficit, to provide a buffer for anti-crisis measure for future challenges, and to provide a sound foundations for growth, and also to protect the living standards of the citizens. So a lot of challenges combined, and I'm very happy that today, before you, journalists and citizens, everyone following us through the media, we also achieved an agreement for the second tranche. In this stage, we'll have other procedures through the IMF management, but our first conditions was to adopt a budget with 3.4% deficit, which is significantly lower compared to this year. Compared from COVID, we had 8% of the GDP, we had a recession of over 7%, but now we have a trend of accelerating growth. So next year, it should be higher than this year. The inflation is already in the single digits. Hopefully last year it will drop to 3.5%. So we have rising expectations, and we are building a solid foundation for the future. So together, I can speak on behalf of my colleagues, the ministers and the Prime Minister. We are all supporting this budget. We'll present it before the Parliament, including all the recommendations, and with the support of international institutions such as the IMF and other institutions that support us, the European Commission, the World Bank, and other banks who are financially supporting our budgeting. This gives us the foundation to have a good credit rating of the country on international financial markets. So for the investors, we can show that we have consistent and predictable policies. So under conditions of great uncertainty and risks, we are conducting sustainable policies, sustainable funding, and we have solid foundation for short-term and mid-term growth. Now we'll take questions from the journalists. I have a question for the guest. The last evaluation of IMF for this country, you said that the salary increase could accelerate the inflation. We expect the minimum salary is going to rise next year, which means that the average salary will also rise. How risky is this for the growth of inflation in Macedonia?
Reality is that we don't know. We do not have an exact model that tells us what's the transmission from wages to inflation, but the risk is there. That's why I highlighted it, and that is why it's important that everyone behaves with prudent policies. If people abide by the general collective agreement, we are not concerned. In fact, if you look at our inflation forecast for next year, we are very, very close to the central bank, so we expect continued disinflation. Our concern is really if people go beyond what has already been agreed. So that's the concern.
Could you comment about the next year budget? 3.4% GDP growth, 3.6% inflation rate, and the budget deficit is 3.4%. Are these figures realistic? Because we do a couple of rebalances during the year. We revised the capital expenditures last year. They were planned to be 800 million euros. Now then it dropped to 500 million. Now the plan is for 730 million. So these are all very high numbers.
So yes, first let me say that the deficit, yes, it's realistic. And let me say that in terms of deficit, last year, the deficit was actually smaller than what the budget predicted. And this year, as I said, I can say with pretty high confidence that the deficit will be smaller than what is projected. So we have no doubt about last year and this year. For next year, we have spent a lot of time discussing with the government, and we are really confident that the numbers that are in the budget are really consistent with a 3.4 deficit. Again, if there's suddenly new announcements of unfunded policies, no, but we have no reason to believe that that will be the case. There's laws in place, there's agreements in place, and with these agreements, the 3.4 is very plausible and very realistic. Regarding the capital budget, it is true that sometimes there's underspending in the capital budget. Let me say, first, those reallocations do not lead to a higher deficit. That's important. Second, it's true that the capital budget next year is very large, but it's important that it be large because now we're entering into, the big period of quarter 8 and 10D. For example, there's going to be a lot of projects. So in fact, we, in discussions with the government, actually recommended that the capital budget be conservatively large. We did not want to compress and reach a 3.4 just by compressing capex. So actually, we're really comfortable and happy with the budget that we've been discussing. I have not yet seen the budget that was approved by government today, but I have absolutely zero reason to believe that it's in any way, that there's any major differences to the budget that we've been discussing. So, as I said, it's a budget that we are very comfortable with.
Thank you. No other question. This ends our press conference. This is the end of our press conference. No further question.
Thank you. That was